Hey there, I'm Mike. I've been driving a cab around this city for, let's see, nearly 20 years now. Never thought I'd end up behind the wheel of a taxi for a living. But life's funny like that. My old man was a driver too. He used to tell me stories about the people he met, the places he saw. Guess it runs in the blood. After a few odd jobs here and there, I found myself sliding into the driver's seat, and well, here I am. I gotta say, there's something about the city at night that just gets to me. It's peaceful in its own chaotic way. The bright lights against the dark sky. The quiet moments waiting at a red light, watching the stories of the night unfold on the sidewalks. It's like watching a silent movie. Only it's real and it's all around you. And the people. Oh man, the people I've met in this cab. There's been all sorts. The late night party goers spilling their life stories. The early morning workers with coffee in hand, quiet and contemplative. I once had this old lady who'd take my cab every Thursday night to go play bingo. She'd always bring me a piece of cake. Said it was for keeping her company through the city. Then there was this young guy, must have been in his early 20s, who rode with me on New Year's Eve. He was so nervous, practicing a proposal speech for his girlfriend. Asked me to drive around till he got it right. I tell ya, I've seen more of life in this cab than anywhere else. But, not every ride is a feel-good story. Some are just plain bizarre. Like this one time, I picked up a guy dressed as a superhero. He said he was on his way to save his girlfriend from a boring party. Or the woman who spent the entire ride arguing with her boyfriend on the phone, then thanked me for the best therapy session. Every night is different, every ride a new chapter. Keeps the job interesting, to say the least. So it was one of those nights, where the city feels like it's holding its breath. The streets were almost deserted. Just the occasional flash of headlights from a lone car or the distant hum of music spilling out of a late-night bar. The streetlights cast this soft, golden glow on the pavement, sort of like the city's asleep, but still keeping one eye open. I love nights like that. Calm, but with a hint of something about to happen. I'm cruising down the main drag when I see this hand shoot up from the sidewalk. It's a passenger looking to catch a ride. I pull over and the guy gets in. He's dressed pretty plain, nothing that stands out. A regular Joe, you might say. But the moment he gets in, he hands me this card. It says he's deaf and uses a notepad to communicate. I nod, understanding, and hand back the card. This isn't the first time that I have had a deaf passenger. He pulls out this little notepad and scribbles something down. It's an address. Somewhere on the outskirts of the city. One of those parts you don't go to unless you've got a reason. I nod again and start the meter. In my rear view, I see him settle into the seat. His eyes looking out the window, lost in thought or something. I get this feeling, that this ride might be different from the usual fares. I start driving, taking the familiar turns and shortcuts. The city begins passing by in a blur of shadows and light. The guy in the back doesn't make a sound, just sits there, looking out into the night. It's peaceful, in a way. But there's also this undercurrent of anticipation, like the quiet before a storm. The ride continues like any other. We're cruising along the empty streets, and the guy in the back hands me a note. It's nothing out of the ordinary. Just asks if I can crank up the heat a bit. I nod and adjust the dial, easy enough. A few minutes later, another note comes up, asking how long till we get to the destination. I scribble a quick estimate and pass it back. Standard stuff, really. But then the notes start getting a bit off. The next one he hands me makes me do a double take. It reads, "Do you ever think about how easy it is to disappear in a city like this?" I glance at him in the rearview mirror, but his face doesn't give anything away. Just staring out the window, same as before. I chuckle nervously, writing back something about the city being full of surprises and hand it over. We're about halfway to the destination when the next note comes. This one sends a chill down my spine. Sometimes I feel like I'm being followed. Do you ever feel that way? Now, I'm starting to get a bit uneasy. I reply with a quick not really and try to focus on the road. But my mind's racing. Who is this guy? What's with these creepy notes? The real kicker comes a few minutes later. I'm still trying to shake off the weirdness of the last note when he hands me another. I open it, and it's like my heart stops for a second. Have you ever wanted to do something terrible just to see what it's like? That's it, plain and simple, in neat handwriting. My hands grip the steering wheel a little tighter. This isn't normal. This isn't right. I take a deep breath, trying to keep it together. Part of me wants to pull over, end this ride right here. But another part, the part that's driven a cab for 20 years and seen all sorts of strange, is curious. Maybe even a bit worried about what's going on with this guy. I write back a note saying, "No, can't say I have," and pass the note back to him. He doesn't write anything else after that. He just sits there, looking out into the night. And I'm driving feeling this weight in the air. This sense of something unresolved, something dark. I keep my eyes on the road. But every so often, I can't help but glance back at him, wondering who he is, what he's thinking, and what this ride might turn into. We're getting closer to the drop-off, the city lights fading behind us when he hands me one last note. My gut's telling me I don't want to read it, but I can't help myself. I open it, and what I see makes my blood run cold. It's just a few words, but they hit me like a punch in the gut. Tonight's the night. You'll see what I mean soon. I feel this cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. My hands are trembling a bit as I keep the taxi steady. I steal a glance at him through the rearview mirror. He's just sitting there, calm as ever, like he didn't just drop a bombshell in my lap. What does he mean? What's going to happen tonight? A million questions are racing through my head, but I'm not sure I want the answers. We finally pull up to the destination, and it's this old, rundown part of town. Buildings are boarded up. Street lights are out. The whole place feels like a ghost town. It's the kind of spot that makes you wish you were anywhere but there. The air feels heavy, like it's charged with something I can't quite put my finger on. He doesn't move at first, just sits there. Then without a word, he opens the door and steps out into the darkness. I'm left there, behind the wheel, heart pounding in my chest, trying to make sense of it all. The door of the cab shuts with this finality that echoes in the empty streets. I sit there for what feels like forever, staring at the spot where he disappeared. I keep thinking about that last note, turning it over in my mind. What did he mean? Was it a threat? A confession? A warning? I don't know, and that uncertainty is gnawing at me. Finally, I put the cab in gear and pull away, glancing back one last time at the shadows where he vanished. The city feels different now, more ominous, like I've just scratched the surface of something much darker. So there I am driving back to the city, but my mind's still stuck on that desolate street. The guy's gone, but the weight of his words is still hanging in the air, heavy and unnerving. I keep turning that last note over in my head. Tonight's the night. You'll see what I mean soon. What was he trying to tell me? Was it just the ramblings of someone lost in their own world? Or something more? I can't shake the feeling that there was a deeper meaning. A warning or maybe a prophecy hidden in those words. I've seen my fair share of oddballs and eccentrics in my time driving the cab. But this guy was different. It wasn't just what he wrote. It was the way he wrote it, with such certainty, such purpose. It's like he knew something I didn't. And the thought of that just sends shivers down my spine. The city lights are bright as I drive back into town. but they don't seem to penetrate the darkness that's settled inside me. I keep glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him sitting there with another note, another piece to this puzzle. But the back seat's empty, just shadows and silence. I pull up to a red light, and I'm just sitting there, the hum of the engine the only sound. That's when it hits me. Maybe I'll never know what he meant, who he was, or what he was trying to say. And maybe that's the scariest part of all, the not knowing. The unanswered questions. They stick with you, haunt you in a way that concrete things don't. I drive through the night, the city passing by my windows, but my mind's still on that silent passenger and his cryptic notes. As the night shifts to dawn, I realize that some mysteries are just destined to remain unsolved, lingering in the back of your mind. A constant reminder of the unknown that lurks just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. You know, driving a bus on the night shift, you see a lot of weird stuff. But there's this one night that sticks with me, gives me the chills just thinking about it. I've been driving this route for years, through the city and then out into the outskirts, where it's just long stretches of road and not much else. At that hour, the streets are pretty much deserted, and it's just me and the hum of the engine. So there I am, it's around 2 a.m., the kind of hour when the world feels like it's holding its breath. My bus is rolling along, empty as usual, just the hum of the engine and the soft glow of the streetlights. That's when this guy boards the bus. Now, I've seen all sorts of folks on my night route, but this guy, he was a different story. He steps on and there's this immediate, weird vibe that fills the air. He's shrouded in this tattered old coat, hood pulled low over his face, like he's trying to hide from the world. There's a sense of unease about him, like he's carrying a heavy, dark cloud. He doesn't look up, doesn't say a word, just shuffles forward, his movements kinda stiff and unnatural. He reaches the fare box, and I hear the coins clink as they drop in. But he's doing it real slow, deliberate, like each coin is a decision he's making. He still hasn't looked at me, not once. The silence is thick, just the sound of his ragged breathing. Then, without a word, he turns and heads down the aisle. His steps are heavy, dragging almost, like each step is an effort. I watch him in the rearview mirror as he makes his way to the back of the bus. He chooses the last row, sinking into the seat like a shadow melting into darkness. This whole time, I'm trying to shake off this feeling, telling myself it's just another night, just another passenger. But man, something about this guy was just off. Like he wasn't just another night owl or a weary traveler. There was something more, something hidden beneath that hood in the way he moved, the way he carried himself. I try to focus on the road, on the empty streets lit by the occasional street lamp. But in the back of my mind, I can't help but wonder about this guy. Who is he? Where's he going at this ungodly hour? I've seen a lot on this job, but this dude, he gave me the creeps, and that's saying something. I keep driving, making the usual stops, but no one else gets on, and I never hear the bell ring from the back. I figure maybe the guy's asleep or something. It's not uncommon for passengers to doze off, especially this late. But as I'm driving, this uneasy feeling starts creeping up on me. The roads are eerily quiet, and every now and then, I glance in the rearview mirror just to check. I'm telling you, what happened next, it just didn't make any sense. I'm driving along, never stopping, never opening the doors after that guy got on. But then when I look back, he's gone. Vanished. It's like he dissolved into thin air or something. I pull over, heart pounding in my chest, thinking this has got to be some kind of joke. But who plays a joke like this at 2 a.m? I get up from my seat, my mind swirling with a million thoughts. I start searching the bus, looking under seats, checking the back. I checked every possible spot where a person could hide, but there's nobody. It's like the guy was a ghost or something. The whole bus is silent, just the sound of my own breathing and the soft hum of the engine idling. And the more I search, the weirder it gets. Why would someone get on a bus only to hide and then just disappear? What was this guy's deal? Was he up to something? You hear stories, about people with bad intentions. But this was something else. My heart's racing, and I'm starting to feel this cold sweat on my back. The whole thing is just freaking me out. I sit back down in the driver's seat, trying to make sense of it all. My hands are shaking a bit as I grab the wheel. The bus is empty, quiet, like I'm the only person in the world at that moment. But I can't shake the feeling that something's off, like I missed something important. It's like there's an echo of that guy still hanging in the air, a presence that shouldn't be there. I decide to keep driving, but the rest of the night, I'm on edge. Every shadow, every sound makes me jump. I keep glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that guy's face, but there's nothing. Just the empty seats and the dim lights of the bus. After that night, I just couldn't do it anymore. I told my boss I was done with the night shift. I've talked to the other drivers about it, but they just laugh. They think I'm pulling their leg. But I know what I saw, or rather, what I didn't see. That night messed with my head, and I still get spooked whenever I think about it. I call it the night bus to the unknown. It's one ride I'll never forget. Hey there, I'm Nate, and for the past year, I've been working the graveyard shift at this 24-hour gym downtown. Why the night shift, you ask? Well, I'm also juggling college during the day, and honestly, I kind of like the quiet of the night. It's just me, the clank of weights, and the occasional night owl looking to burn some midnight calories. The gym's this sprawling place, all modern and sleek during the day. But at night, it's a whole different vibe. The bright lights feel a bit too harsh against the dark outside, and the rows of treadmills and weight machines cast these long, weird shadows. It's usually deserted, which I don't mind. Gives me time to study or just chill. Working nights here, you see some quirky stuff. Like this one guy always comes in around 3 a.m. Does exactly 27 minutes on the treadmill. Never a second more or less. Or this lady who brings in her cat in a stroller, swears it helps her with her cardio. And don't get me started on the midnight bodybuilders. Flexing and taking selfies in the mirror. It's like a circus sometimes, but hey, keeps things interesting. So this story really begins with this one dude who started showing up a few months back. The first night he walked in, he caught my eye immediately. He was a big guy, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that made him look like he could carry the weight of the world. He had this rugged, unshaven look, with a mop of unruly dark hair that seemed to match his "don't mess with me" vibe. But it was his eyes that really set him apart. They were intense, piercing, like they were burning with some inner fire or unspoken mission. He had this way of looking around the gym, taking everything in with a steely, almost calculating gaze. It was like he was sizing up the place, asserting his presence without saying a word. At first, I didn't pay much attention. You get all types at a gym, right? Some folks are there to show off, some to escape, and others just to grind out their day's frustrations. But this guy, he was different. His workout gear was always plain. No flashy logos or bright colors. Just simple, functional attire that seemed to emphasize his no-nonsense attitude. He'd hit the weights like a man possessed. Each movement precise and powerful. He wasn't just lifting. He was attacking the weights. As if each rep was a battle he needed to win. His intensity was off the charts, lifting more than anyone I'd ever seen at the gym. It wasn't just about strength. It was about proving something, though I had no idea what. He wouldn't take breaks, just kept pushing himself harder and harder. It was kinda impressive, but also a bit intense. But then things started getting weird. Real weird. Every night he came in, his routine got more and more intense. I'd catch him staring at the walls, just blankly looking at nothing for minutes on end. Sometimes he'd be muttering under his breath. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but it gave me the creeps. He had this focus that was way beyond normal, like he was in his own world. That's when I started feeling uneasy. The gym at night had always been my quiet, peaceful zone. But now, there was this tension in the air, a kind of electricity that put me on edge. Each night he came in, I found myself watching him, half curious, half worried about what he'd do next. It was like waiting for a storm to break. You know something's coming, you just don't know what. Things hit a whole new level of bizarre with this guy. It started with the way he did his exercises. He wasn't just working out anymore. It was like he was performing some sort of ritual. He'd arrange the weights in these precise patterns on the floor, and then do his sets in this frantic, almost manic way. I'm talking non-stop, sweat pouring down his face, grunting like each lift was a battle. And then there were the conversations with the gym equipment. Yeah, you heard that right. He'd be there, talking to the dumbbells and treadmills like they were old pals, nodding and laughing as if they were talking back. It was freaky. I didn't know whether to laugh it off or get seriously concerned. I kept wrestling with the idea of confronting him, or maybe even calling the cops. But what would I say? Hey, there's a guy in here talking to the weights. I kept hoping it was just a phase or something, that he'd snap out of it. But no such luck. Then came the night that really shook me. He was there, as usual, doing his strange routine, when suddenly he starts screaming. Not in pain or anything. It was like rage, pure and raw. He's throwing weights around, pounding his fists on the machines. It was like watching someone lose their last grip on reality. That's when I thought, okay, this has gone too far. I was frozen for a moment, just watching this meltdown. My heart was racing, and I honestly didn't know what to do. Help him? Run? In the end, I managed to stammer out something, asking him if he was okay. He just glared at me, this wild, unhinged look in his eyes, and then stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I was left there in the echo of that door slam, heart pounding, feeling like I'd just witnessed something I shouldn't have. The weights were scattered all over, like remnants of a storm. That night, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. What if he came back? What if next time it was worse? After that night, the gym felt different. The guy never came back, but the shadow of what happened lingered. The weights lay there on the floor for a while that night. It felt like a crime scene until I finally mustered up the courage to put them back. The silence of the gym was back, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was tense, loaded, like the calm before another storm. I kept going over it in my head. Who was this guy? What was going through his mind during those workouts? Was it just stress or something darker? I'd lied awake at night, replaying that last night over and over, his scream echoing in my ears. I even did some digging online, trying to see if there were any local reports of incidents or anything that might explain his behavior. Nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air. The gym went back to its usual routine, the night shift as quiet as before. But for me, it's never been the same. Every time the door opens, I brace myself, half expecting him to walk back in. I find myself watching the clock, tensing up as it nears the time he used to arrive. I've thought about quitting, finding a day job instead. But part of me needs to know, needs to understand what happened. Maybe he'll come back, maybe he won't. Maybe I'll never get the answers I'm looking for. But one thing's for sure, the night shift at the gym isn't just a job anymore. It's a nightly vigil, a watch for the unknown, for the unresolved mysteries that lurk in the shadows of the seemingly mundane.